Hey, if you're a journalist who uses the tool Help a Reporter Out, or Harrow, listen up. Harrow is moving to Cision's new app, Connectively. But what is Connectively? Well, imagine a place where you can quickly connect with expert sources for your next story. Connectively is a new app from Cision that's changing the way journalists, like us, content creators, experts and PRs work together. So if you're in search of credible sources, Connectively is your next stop. With just a click, you can publish your queries. These go straight to a feed where experts from loads of different backgrounds can respond, giving you their expertise. So go on, visit connectively.us to sign up for free. That's connectively.us. Connectively.us.
Hello and welcome back to Series 13 of Freelancing for Journalists. This series is all about diversifying your income, so we'll be talking about all those different strings to your bow that you can add that are related perhaps to your journalism work.
Yes, we're really excited to be back. It's lovely to be recording the podcast again. And our first episode of this series is going to be about lecturing, how to break into lecturing. We get so many questions on this all the time. When we mentioned in our Facebook group recently that we were doing this, we had so many people saying, I want to know about this, I want to know about this. So we have two experienced lecturers who are also freelance journalists, Jamie Boddy and Beth Neil, and they had some fantastic advice for you all. So yeah, it's going to be a really good episode. I think it will be really helpful to you all. Before we get to that, Lily, should we talk very quickly about our win of the week?
Yes. So, okay, well, I will say my win of the week is I've got a new computer, but that's a bit boring. Although very exciting.
Needed.
Yes, mine has been dying very, very slowly and painfully. But I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use the fact that I have finally, it's a bit of a double whammy this. There's a story I've been pitching absolutely everywhere, and I kept getting little bites and then people going quiet, and I was like, why can't I place this anywhere? This is a really good story. Anyway, I've finally got a commission, and it's also for a publication that I've been trying to get into for ages, but it's not the magazine which I've been targeting. They've actually got a digital platform which is membership only. And it was through actually chatting to a PR who gave me the contact and said, this person's commissioning for the digital membership area. Why don't you speak to them if you've got any story ideas? So basically, it's all come together very nicely with the help of the PR, which, you know me, Emma, I'm not a big fan of PRs, but this one actually is becoming a very good contact. So yes, all came together very nicely, so I've just got to write up the story now.
That's good. It's nice when you know you've got a good idea, but you just can't find that right home.
No.
It's really frustrating. So it's good when it pays off in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So come on then, what is your win of the week?
Well, I don't know if this is a win of the week or a complete fail of the week. I can't quite work out which one it is. But last week, I was working for Pulse, and I did an exclusive story, and I put it together in a day, and did it kind of all myself, got organisations to comment, get loads of GPs to comment. It was basically about very, very long waiting times, with people who've got chest pain that might be suggesting of heart problems. It used to be 2 weeks you got seen in, and now it's months and months and months. And I had so many GPs from all around the country, because I couldn't work out how to do the story because they don't collect any figures on it. So I was trying to work out how to do it. My editor was really pleased with it. It went online on Friday, and I just noticed today that the Telegraph had done it. And initially I was like, oh, fantastic. They've picked up the story. It's got national coverage. That's really good. And when I looked at it, it was just word for word, my story. Every single GP quote, the only thing that was different was they managed to get a quote from NHS England on the end, which I hadn't got because NHS England spend their life ignoring every email that I ever send them. I'm not important enough to get that.
That's quite funny, isn't it? Actually, NHS England quote.
Well, they got that stuck on there and didn't say anything of any use. But everything else, every other, including one comment from sort of an organisation, because my editor wanted something that had some kind of power behind it. So it was a cardiologist who was speaking on behalf of this organisation. And I spoke to him in the car at 5:30 at night when I was picking my daughter up from a hockey match and had to write it on the back of a risk assessment form I found in the car door with a pen that I found because I didn't know he was calling. So it feels like I juggled that and then I came back and wrote it up and did all this extra work. And someone's just like, it's just the exact same article. They're not even tried to do their own bit. And they did mention Pulse in some of it. So I don't know if that's a win or a fail. I can't tell, but it's there.
It's really annoying. And it's so difficult to kind of, chase those up and get, say, pay me for that. You've nicked my story. But it's a bit calmer. I must say, there was a story on the Telegraph last week that I thought, oh, that's a good story. And I just gave it a slightly different angle and sold it elsewhere. I did get some new quotes, but the bulk of it, the idea came from them. So,
well, that's the thing. I was hoping they would at least get one of their own quotes to go in there. There was some line about a Telegraph investigation, but yeah, I was just like, that's a bit cheeky because I was doing a news shift at the time. Yeah. It's not like I'd specifically pitched it. It's just a bit, should I invoice them? I don't know. But anyway, it's there. I obviously did a story that had interest, so we'll take that as a journalistic win.
Yes, and I have had that happen before. And what I've done is then I've contacted that journalist when I've had an idea and I've said, hi, I wrote the original story that you followed up. And so then they know kind of who you are. And then I said, and I've got this other story idea. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in working with me. So slightly passive aggressive, but it did work in that instance. That was with the Times, actually. So maybe use it as an in.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe I'll just have to, see if there's a way that I can use it to my advantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Let's crack on. So let's introduce our guests, who both have lots of experience in lecturing alongside their work as freelance journalists.
Yes, today we have with us Jamie Boddy, an entertainment journalist and presenter based in London. On the freelance side of his job, he can often be found on the red carpet interviewing celebrities. But he also shares his experience and skills with the next generation of journalists. And he's lectured at various universities, which include Winchester, Sheffield Hallam, and also, intriguingly, the Royal Ballet School.
And we also have with us Beth Neil, a freelance writer, journalist and media trainer who in the past has worked for Fabulous magazine and The Mirror. For the past 3 years, Beth has also worked as an associate lecturer at Northumbria University in Newcastle. So hello, welcome both of you to the podcast. I'm really interested to dig into this because working for universities is something we get asked about an awful lot. People are really keen to hear how you get into that role. So Jamie, I'll start with you. How did you get into lecturing in the first place? And I think you do lots of different things. So can you explain to us what sort of work you're doing with the students?
Yeah, sure. And also, first of all, thanks for having me. I feel like I've made it now. Like, when you're on Ellen or Graham Norton, I'm like, I'm on the podcast finally. Yes, so I kind of lecture broad spectrum, either covering entertainment, journalism and podcasting, or performer branding and digital presence and how to pitch yourself as a creative. So in a nutshell, I actually used to be a professional dancer. And although I don't necessarily dance as much now, if the phone rings, I still kick my leg. But what I found was from my past experience, myself and colleagues, the things that they were missing when you're learning, like how to construct a CV, how to email, what's good social media etiquette. So I kind of combined that with my journalism experience to kind of create this workshop. So I go into a lot of performing arts universities where you wouldn't initially think you would lecture there, such as the Royal Ballet School. I work on the English National Ballet School's graduate programme, Performers College, Wombo Dance. So they are either uni courses or accredited course to whatever level, but it's a lot more on their digital presence. That's kind of one stream. And then the other stream is maybe a bit more straight-laced, where it's the entertainment beat, working with PRs and how to kind of create your own podcast.
Yeah, and I actually had you come in, didn't I, at Sheffield Hallam, and you spoke to some of my students about podcasting. I believe that was during lockdown, was it?
It was, and that's kind of actually how one of the ways I got into lecturing as well. And that opened up some other doors. So I've also worked with their magazine students on their kind of life and style journalism section as well. And I'm sure we'll go into this in more detail, but what I've found is once you lecture somewhere and kind of get your slides ready or how to kind of pitch it, it's a springboard to get other opportunities as well.
Yeah, and it definitely, like within one institution as well, like you say, you know, you teach on one module and then your name gets passed to someone else on another module and it can kind of spread from there. And yeah, we'll definitely dig into more of that. But Beth, let's bring you in then. So tell us kind of what kind of lecturing work you've been doing and who you've been working for.
Well, I kind of fell into it. It was never part of the plan, but I went freelance about 3 years ago now after being staff journalist for about 20 years. We lived in London. We moved, been in London for about 15, 16 years, and we moved back to the Northeast where I'm from originally. And it was through an ex-journalist who I knew through mutual friends who'd gone into academia. She was a course leader at Northumbria University teaching on fashion communication. And she asked if she'd heard I was back in the area, and she asked if I'd like to come in and help her with the magazine journalism side of one of the modules. And yeah, that was, well, I've done that I've been back for 3 years now. So I do first years and second years. And I teach, it's purely magazine journalism that I teach. And, you know, it's a fashion communication course. So not everybody on that course wants to be a journalist. Some do, some don't, but it's about, you know, engaging everybody in what it's actually a really lively part of the module. I find it's really fun teaching it. You get all sorts of we do lots of assessed work. The big assessed work, piece of assessed work, and the first years they have to produce a profile piece at the end of the first semester. In the second years they have to produce a feature with 2 primary sources and some secondary research as well. Yeah, that's like I say, I never expected to get into this side of things, but I'm really, really enjoying it. And it's a nice little sideline I've found to my my main job, which is still as a freelance journalist.
Yeah, Beth, that was really similar to how I started and I was just working out how long ago this was this morning, but I moved back from London to Sheffield 17 years ago and just bumped into an ex-tutor who was teaching some science students journalism skills and said, I can't deal with them. Can you come in and do it? That was how that started. But it properly snowballed into kind of just different bits of... I've done it ever since. And now I'm an associate lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University doing bits and bobs. So it's funny, isn't it, how you sort of just find your way? I mean, Beth, can I just ask you, when you started, did you get support in knowing what content to teach and sort of what was expected of you, or was it a bit sort of thrown in the deep end?
It was a bit of both. I did feel supported, but I was also incredibly nervous when I went in for the first time. I didn't know what was really expected of me. I didn't know if I was able to teach. You know, I've never done anything like that before. I'm not particularly confident at public speaking normally, and so it was a real challenge. But I was very well supported by Julie Bradford, she's not there at Northumbria anymore. She was the who brought me in, and we worked closely together on the presentations that we were going to put together for each week, and she'd ask me for contributions. And so after that first year that I did, I felt much more confident going into the second year. Whereas Julie wasn't there anymore, so I was kind of not on my own. I was supported by another journalist who was also teaching, but there was just the two of us that kind of ran that side of the module between the two of us.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point as well that people might not realise is you can sometimes be literally like parachuted in and you're just kind of dropped into a classroom. Here, teach them this. And then before you know it, you're kind of running the whole module. And you don't necessarily get much, if any, support. I mean, has that been your experience, Beth?
Yeah, so I was surprised at how much we were left to our own devices. but also surprised myself at how much I was able to teach. And you don't realise actually when you're working in the job that you're learning all the time. And you've got these students coming in and they don't really know anything about how the media industry works. And there's so much that you can tell them, and you don't know until you start teaching how much you know, and how much they want to learn about. And they find it really interesting, something that I've worked, an industry I've worked in for over 20 years. And it's just kind of matter of fact to me because it's just what I do. But other people who aren't in that industry, they do find it really interesting and they want to learn. They're intrigued by it.
Yeah. What I find fascinating as well is students may have heard the lecturer tell them something several times, but it's not until someone comes in who they see as like working in industry at this moment that they go, oh, they said that, I'm going to do that. And, I know I've kind of done it on both sides, but I know as a lecturer, I'll be saying things and it's not going in. And then as soon as the guest speaker says it, the students, it sinks in and I think they think it's real because a real person has told them it. So that I find that really interesting, and that they do love it. And Jamie, what's your experience been like? Have you found that you've been given support, or are you just coming into like one-off workshops rather than like entire modules?
It does depend. Some I am brought in for the module on a set day, and some of them are this kind of ad hoc, maybe 2 days or so on. And I think I've always had support. What I found, and this could be different other people's experience, that depending on the size of the uni, there's several cogs that you have to liaise with to go in. So although I'm given support, sometimes it might be like, this person can help me mildly with support on this, but then it's different for finance, different for the AV team, different for estate. So everyone has been helpful, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I've had to get help from 5 people to execute this like one part of the unit, where maybe as a freelancer, we're quite good at our time because we're a solo entity of this kind of being quite streamlined. So I guess I've always had support, but it varies maybe in how many people I have to go to get that support. And that's just one thing, I guess, from lecturing. You don't always factor in like, oh, I've had to send out 5 emails. How do you people not talk to each other? And that's not like malicious. It's just they're a massive organisation. Each got their own things going. So you're like, oh, okay, let me piece this together. So yes, always had support, but it varies if it's from multiple sources. Always kind of just muck in and find out when you get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that freelancers were really good at problem solving, but we're used to solving our own problems. We just kind of work for ourselves. If we've got an IT problem, if we've got a finance problem, whatever, we'll just try and fix it ourselves. Whereas universities are just massive, massive organisations with lots of governance and steps and complicated bits. But I've kind of learned over time, I think, not to worry about things. I've been lecturing when all the lights have gone out in the middle of the room, or like your IT won't look, and you just kind of have to sort of solve these things as you go along. But I think, like Lily said, the students really do appreciate being taught by people who are practicing in that field, practicing journalists right now. So there might be some slides that I've been given to deliver with like, I don't know, examples that are years out of date, whereas I can, well, last week this happened to me and this is how I solved it. And they just start to listen, don't they?
Yeah.
Then and sort of and perk up about it. Were there ever sort of any imposter sort of syndrome thing that you had to try and get past at the beginning though, Jamie? Was it sort of a bit like, am I the right person to be doing this? Because I know we get that question a lot as well.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And that's one thing I'm sure of you, Beth, as well, when you tell your students that never really goes. You maybe get thicker skin with it. But yes, I also think because it blurs the line sometimes when you are a working professional, but then you're also talking about it as well. Sometimes I think it resonates with a lot of students, but sometimes you and yourself, especially if you're sat in an institute staff room and they work there all the time and you're a bit like, oh, I'm new. But you kind of have to get on with it and realise that they've brought you in for a reason, like you are solving a problem. I think the biggest one for me was a lot of my digital lecturing on digital presence and personal marketing. I had to pitch that myself. So it was treading that line of realising there was a gap in some curriculums. And obviously people don't like to be told maybe what they're not offering. So it's working out, right, how do I articulate this in a way that at the end of the day benefits the students? Yes, it benefits me because it's employment and money, but was also not insulting them to be like, you don't do this. So I think that at first, when you're kind of doing that cold call in, was a lot of imposter syndrome to be like, I have no idea how they're going to read this. And you tell yourself as much as you can, like, it's none of my business what they think of me. But I think it always still kind of gets to you. But once you get that shiny thing and someone says yes, that's always that moment to be like, if someone likes it, someone else will like it. But yeah, I think definitely that imposter syndrome does sneak in, especially, again, I don't know if you find this, Beth, when there's some students that want the uni experience, they don't necessarily want the course experience. You know, they're away from home and you're trying not to read body language and you're like, you don't want to be here, do you? When you completely ignore the fact that there's 39 other people that are chomping at the bit that want to be there, sometimes you look at that one person and you think, oh, how could I make that more interesting for them? So yes, imposter system is real, but you just kind of learn to do a bit more, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree with that. It does, I still do feel a huge weight of responsibility getting these students through this part of the module. And I do, and I have worried about it. I mean, am I the right person? But I think I do that. You also get a bit of validation back because my teaching is a mix of presentations and individual tutorials, and I particularly love the individual tutorials because you can really sit down with a student, go through a piece of work that they've produced, and drill down into what makes it good, how it can be improved, what they could do a bit differently, and they go away and they come back having implemented your feedback from the discussion, and it reads so much better. And that's one of the joys I've found of teaching, is that individual work and seeing, the feedback that I've given on structure or language or, anything to do with their writing, and they come back and it's improved, and that's a great feeling. It's so satisfying when that happens.
Yeah, and it's really nice when they actually take that feedback on board and they follow it. And kind of, I suppose, leading on from that, obviously, you've both got loads of experience in your field, but sometimes one of the questions we get asked is, but don't you need some kind of teaching qualification to teach at university? Or don't you need to have at least a master's degree? Which I think is kind of, well, it's a myth, to be honest. But were you ever asked for anything like that? Or was it just purely kind of your experience? Jamie, what was your sort of experience on that?
Yeah, for me, it's always just been experience. And then some cases, recommendation also really helps as well. Obviously, the weight of your name if someone else says you're a good egg. But yeah, I would say always experience from me personally has always spoke more than if I had done the academic route, as you said, of the masters and was it a PGCE or what anything like that teacher was. But for me, it's always been experience. That's not to say that that's the only way, but yeah, for me, that's always been kind of the one that's opened the door.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Which I don't have any teaching qualifications, but I do have many, many years professional experience, and I'm still a working journalist, and so I bring that to the table instead. And actually, I teach 3 hours a week for first years and 3 hours a week for second years. So I'm there for six hours. My title is associate lecturer, but I do feel like I'm a guest coming in to offer some expertise in this area. So I think it is a myth. You don't necessarily need a teaching qualification.
Yeah, I mean, I've always seen it as more. So I've taught sort of on like writing for web and news writing modules, and it's almost like you're sort of an editor coming in and imparting your wisdom, really, on kind of how to make a news story good, where to get contacts from, how to do interviews. Sort of, I mean, so much is about building their confidence. I think I found that to be so much of it. I've been surprised by how much of the pastoral stuff you end up doing. That's the bit that makes me flounder a bit sometimes. I mean, you said then, Beth, that you do those sort of 6 hours. How do you balance, because you can get sucked into this world of doing lots and lots of preparation, and like marking can take, depending how much you invest in it, can take a really long time. You don't necessarily get paid for all the hours you're doing. How do you kind of balance kind of making sure it is worth your time for the hours you're getting paid?
Well, the students all know that myself and the other journalists who I teach with, that we don't teach outside of the hours that we're in university. We don't teach by, we can't teach by email. If you haven't attended class on the day, we can't then give you feedback by email during the rest of the week, because that's when we're working our normal jobs. And also you can't do that for every single student that doesn't attend, and attendance is an issue, I think, right across the board in universities. And if you started giving feedback to students who haven't been in class that week, to every student who hadn't been in class, you'd never get anything else done. So we're very clear from the outset that that we are not available in between classes for feedback. In terms of prep, I do have to be quite disciplined with what I end up doing my prep across weekends, so it doesn't interrupt the rest of my work. And with marking, that is something that I've yet to master doing quickly. I probably spend far too much time marking, because I do things like I fact check, I look at their grammar and their spelling and their structure, and I give lots and lots and lots of feedback, and it's probably it's not, I need to really hone that down. I think I mark like a journalist rather than an academic.
And Jamie, have you found that with sort of, you've had to create your own content because you spotted a gap on, aspects that students weren't being taught about, so you're obviously creating what you're going to deliver? And how do you balance, if you're going in to do a 1 hour lecture, how much preparation you're doing versus how much you're getting paid to do that?
Yes, and I think that's one thing you don't realise maybe getting into lecturing is the unbillable hours that are in it. And I think when I first started out, more so with the lecture I created, should I say, on the performer branding, over years I'd slowly been I had like this book of all my notes when I used to work in arts marketing and journalism and as a performer. And randomly I was in Barcelona with a job, and I had 3 days in between day 1 and day 2 of this job. And most people thought I was mad, but I locked myself away in a hotel room in Barcelona for like a day. And this kind of right, let's see how this sits into like a keynote or whatnot. So yeah, that was months of note taking to all of a sudden a whole day of creating this lecture. And from there I add to it. But what I would say is from that, I managed to create a 1 hour version, a 3 hour version. And then on Wednesday, I'm working with some MA students. I've now got a 6 hour version. So I've got sections I can take in and out. So there was a lot of prep time, I think, especially when you start out. Even if it's just because some unis, you have to sign onto their system so you can get paid and use the Wi-Fi. And that in itself can take days of emails back and forth. So I think there was a lot of prep time. And if module units change, I've been quite fortunate at some institutes, my series of lectures would stay the same for a couple of years, but then all of a sudden, maybe their accrediting body has changed, or as we know, the journalism landscape has changed dramatically with social media, the digital platforms. So then you have to get the new spec and rework it. So there's always been quite a lot of prep time, but I have found those windows when I'm a year with no amendments made. Great. I'm fortunate I don't have to mark coursework or anything like that. However, I do sometimes get additional questions, so I'll spend time maybe following up with the individual questions and whatnot. But I think I'm quite lucky that I don't actually therefore have to go through and mark any. And say what I do and then I leave.
Yeah, that's a nice position to be in. Yeah, and I think marking kind of varies from institution to institution. And sometimes it's built into the overall hours, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's additional. And you kind of have to work out the quirks of each institution because it will be different. And sometimes it's like with any kind of freelance, it's knowing kind of when to say no. Like if I'm not getting paid for that, I'm not doing that. You're nodding there, Beth. Is marking something that?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think that in the contract, it's that the rule is you're paid by the hour, and marking and prep is included in that hourly rate. If the marking and prep exceeds the teaching hours, then you have a right to claim extra. And that's not something I've done yet, but I'm certain the last semester that I worked, the marking absolutely and prep did exceed the teaching hours, and that is something that if I'm back again in September, that I will certainly be raising, because it's not right.
Yeah, I mean, what people probably don't realise is behind the scenes there is normally a really complicated formula working out the hours of all the staff and all the part-time staff. An hour actually equates to like 2.5 hours. And there's different types of hours for different types of work. I know when I worked on that side of management, you know, I was dishing out the hours and I like couldn't get my head around all these formulas. It's just so complicated. And I think, yeah, a lot of places are sort of trying to squeeze a lot more out of everyone. But it's interestingly, you've mentioned the term associate lecturer, but a lot of our listeners might not know what that means and what the difference is perhaps between that and a guest lecturer or a guest speaker. So Beth, can you explain to us what an associate lecturer is? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I just know I am one. I guess it's. I mean, I'm not staff, but I am on the payroll.
Yeah.
So I'm contracted, but I'm still. Yeah. Does that sound right?
Yeah,
I'll go with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's essentially a 0 hours contract, but you are, you know, you're on staff, you've got an email, you're contracted to so many hours, which might change, which might fluctuate, but you're sort of on that group of people that they can call on for certain modules or lectures, as opposed to a guest lecture where someone invites you to speak. And I think because a lot of that went remote during COVID, I've been invited to do a lot more guest lectures than I ever used to, but they can be a real pain itself because you think, oh, this is interesting, and they're going to pay me £50, and I'm just talking about what I'm doing. I don't really have anything to prepare. But then I've spent twice as long doing the admin to get paid that £50 because you have to get on a new system and they insist on setting you up on payroll and you get taxed on it. You're like, this is madness. I've had twice where I've had to go and show my passport on a Zoom to somebody to prove that I have a right to work in the UK for an hour guest lecture. And I know there's processes, but it's just like, well, this isn't what I don't think this is worth my time really anymore. But yeah, I mean, I suppose we've all mentioned sort of pros and cons there, but let's be positive for a moment, and maybe talk about our favourite things about lecturing. Why would someone want to get into it? Jamie, I'll start with you with that one.
I'm also kind of piggybacking off something Beth said earlier on about that student satisfaction. It's really rewarding when you see like that light bulb moment, or you get that follow-up email saying, oh, since you come in, I've secured like a work experience here, or I've got this like junior reporter role, or I've secured a new agent if they're performers. I think that is really rewarding. And then I guess selfishly for me, more so because I come from a performance background, it's like a little mini stage. I love talking to people, but also listening. And quite often when my lectures, they're chunked in time. So I know at this time of year, like at University of Winchester, I work across first, second and third years. And I know at what times of the year they are. So it's really nice for me as a freelancer to know like, oh, this is a really good month because if other commissions are slow, I've got that work in. So it's kind of dual pronged from a student point of view, love working with them, seeing their careers kind of grow, and then also it fits in really nice with my workflow, which means, oh, I don't need to do as many freelance shifts that month, or I can actually have some downtime. So yeah, it's kind of dual-pronged.
Yeah, I think for me, initially at least, there was a lot of wanting to get out of the house, and not just because I'd moved to a new city, so not just wanting to kind of sit at my desk never speaking to anyone, but to get a mix of types of work that I was doing. And Beth, I don't know if that would be on your sort of positive list.
Absolutely. The getting out the house thing is a big bonus for me, because I get dressed in, you know, proper clothes and I get to read my book on the metro into town. So all of that, you know, I used to have on my commute to work when I worked as a staff writer and on magazines and newspapers. That's all come back, and I love that part of my week. But yeah, just to echo what Jamie was saying about the student, the satisfaction you get from teaching the students. And I know that we mentioned just before about how there's a lack of confidence amongst, I don't know if it's particular to this generation or if it's an effect of COVID, but I've noticed a lot of nervousness around talking to people or picking up the phone or making approaches to people who might be interesting to interview. And a lot of my time is spent kind of encouraging students, you know, out of their shell a little bit, to have a little bit of courage to do it. Techniques that they can use to make approaches. And one of the things that I found really joyful is when they've done that, they've sort of come out of their comfort zone and made an approach to somebody, and they've got a response, and someone's agreed to be interviewed, and they come back in, they're thrilled, but also really surprised that someone's agreed to speak to them. And I said, well, that's journalism. Sometimes you get rejected, sometimes you get no response at all, and sometimes people agree to talk to you, and all of that is okay. Doesn't matter. It's not a reflection on you personally if someone doesn't want to talk to you. And seeing that process come to a satisfying conclusion when they've got the interview and they've produced a piece is lovely.
Yeah, it's a good life lesson, isn't it? I think. Also, I think confidence that that they have good ideas that people will want to hear. I think quite a lot of the students that I've taught, there's really interesting things happening to them and their friends, and they've got really interesting perspectives on things, but they don't realise it. They haven't. So just kind of giving that extra, yes, this is absolutely, do something on this, go and find out more about it, is great. I suppose we should also talk about, well, I don't want to say negative, but I suppose if you're going into this with your eyes wide open, what kind of potential downsides or things that people might not realise about working in universities or lecturing? Jamie, if you've got any thoughts.
And also, just quickly on the last question, I should have added, go down the house. Gosh, journalism can be so, especially freelancing, you can be so like silo working. So even that water cooler chat, you need that sometimes. Like my partner will come home and I'm like, I've not left the house in 5 days. Like I need to talk to someone else. So yes. Frustrating. I kind of mentioned it briefly earlier. I think sometimes there's quite a few cogs. And as freelancers, again, when we factor in our days, I'm like, this is my admin day. I'll shoot all my emails out. But for that part of the uni, they may be busy or whatnot, or they might not message me until closer to the time. And then I've got to think, I've got to factor that in, even though I've wrapped that up on my end. So I think the amount of cogs that sometimes can be in the mix can be a little bit frustrating. And depending on if you are on their payroll or not, depending on when your lecture is, you may have just missed that payment cycle. So it could then take, say, 6 weeks or even closer to 2 months to get paid. So I think that's something to factor in, that could be a really good wage. If you're on payroll, you know when that's coming in. As Beth said, some of the places I work, I'm on their payroll, but other ones, I'll literally lecture the day after the cutoff. And I'm like, oh no, and then I'll have to wait like another 6 weeks or so to get paid. So I think, but that's just the whole thing, isn't it, in the freelancing world? But yeah, I think they're kind of my little frustrations.
How about you, Beth?
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I think I'm on the payroll. I would prefer not to be. I would prefer to just be able to invoice, and then it's all kind of under one umbrella as part of my freelance work, rather than have some, my accountant deals with my freelance work and also my pay-as-you-earn work. And it's I would just much prefer if I was just able to invoice for each month. But anyway, I'm over that now. I think we mentioned earlier, like attendance can be a really frustrating part of the job. But again, it's not, that is an issue, I think, throughout universities, and it might be a hangover from COVID still, when people were learning online. We always say, the students who attend regularly and turn up to the one-to-one feedback are the ones that do well on the module, and they get the highest marks. It's not rocket science, that's just fact. So it's just sort of encouraging them actually to come along in person can sometimes be difficult. Not everyone, but you get your regular non-attender. And also, I don't know if any of you have noticed this, but I found there's a real reluctance towards the younger generation to use spell check. And so they'll be submitting which has not been run through a spell check. And that's one of the things that we really do go back to basics with a lot of them, and say that, you should not be submitting work that is not run through at least one spell check, ideally 2, to be absolutely sure. But that is a constant source of frustration for me when I'm marking work that has not been checked. But yeah, that's my journalist coming out in me. Maybe I should let it go a bit more. I don't know.
No, never let it go. I once got so frustrated teaching a news module about just no full stops at the end of sentences, never mind where quote marks were, that I set a test. So I was like, I don't know if you guys actually know this. I don't know if the problem is that no one's taught you that a full stop should go at the end of the sentence. I don't know what's happening. You're not writing text. So I did a whole quiz and I got them prizes. There was chocolate to hand out at the end to make it fun. I was like, I need to know that you know this. This is driving me insane. I can't not. But yeah, I suppose you have to not take it personally. Try and think of fun ways to engage them. I've also had, 3 kids keeping me up all night, turning up to a lecture, kind of got myself, walked through snow to get there, and no students have turned up, and then you're like, oh. But it's not personal, is it? You just have to try and take a deep breath and engage with those who do want to. Lily, I think you had one final question for our...
Yeah, so it's to do with pay really, but I guess more to do with when you're starting out. Just as a little aside as well, Beth, it's funny there when you're talking about getting tax as well, because my accountant always laughs because I normally have about 7 P60s every year. And it's like, why have you got so many? I was like, well, even if I do like 1 hour at one institution, I get a P60 for it. So yeah, it is. It's slightly frustrating, but it's just part of it, I guess. And that's what people should know. That's what they're signing up for. But also, sometimes when we have questions on our Facebook group around teaching, people sort of say, well, I'm only getting paid, say, £50 an hour or £60 an hour. And I've got to travel all the way in, do an hour and then leave again. And that's just not worth my time. And I would always argue, yeah, but you're investing in future teaching by doing that. And before you know it, you could be going in and doing a full day. So what would your advice be to those that are kind of starting out and maybe trying to weigh up like the pay and their time and availability? How can they kind of make the most of that and not be put off by the amount of time it may take in the beginning? Jamie?
Yeah, I think also we should say, don't just do lecturing for an extra bit of pocket money. Not everyone is maybe cut out for it. So that's another thing. So I had a colleague who was like, oh, I could do that and give that a go. But I'm like, yeah, it's not a flash in the pan. As you said, it's long-term and you're helping the students. So I think I would say for the most part, anyone starting out, you may be at a loss in regards to maybe your time. But as you rightly said there, Lily, you're teaching once to hopefully get more teaching or different year groups, and you'll start hearing what questions are being asked a lot. So then you think, great, can I hitch a whole other lecture on that, or can I cover that in a different lecture? So therefore you start earning more income. So I think if anyone is a bit apprehensive, I think, yes, you will have to invest a bit of time to start with. Figure out who does pay the most. Can you do it online? That's another way that your wage may be slightly less, but you doing it from the comfort of the home. If I do sessions that are only an hour, some of that I've worked before, I will sometimes push that just to be online. Because obviously if the students are running late, kind of going on the whole attendance thing, when someone has to check in, that hour can sometimes easily become 45 minutes. So yeah, I think starting out, don't be scared to kind of ask questions, put the feelers out, reach out to who you know first instead of necessarily just thinking of where you want to work, because that can take away that resistance. Instead of thinking, I want to teach at this uni, who do you already know that works at a university? What unis are in your catchment area? Because things like that hopefully might take away that resistance of thinking, oh, what do I do? And also it fits around your other things. So if you've got other commissions or you're on like a long piece, you can make that fit around what you're doing. So even if the money isn't necessarily blow your socks off, it can still be a nice little extra top up. I don't know if I answered that concisely enough. I went around the houses, so I do apologise if I did.
Yeah, you did. I think you need to kind of weigh up, like you say, once you've done a lecture once, you've got that material, you're investing in being able to do that kind of time and time again. I mean, I think you also have to just think around logistics. So I've taught a module where there's big year groups and they've split the module up. So I'm perhaps teaching at 9 in the morning and then the next session's not till 2 on the same day. And there's no point going backwards and forwards. But there is an AL room, associate lecture room, that I can go in and use, and I just do my rest of my work in there. And so I'm not kind of wasting all my time travelling. I'm sitting down and I've got a computer and I'm just using their heating instead of my own at home while I do the rest of my freelance work. I think as freelancers, we're used to the juggle, aren't we? But Beth, have you got any sort of advice for people who are sort of weighing up those pros and cons?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that, one thing tends to lead to another to look to another. So I started off teaching first years and I was asked to come along and help with the second years. And then last year I joined the final project module for third years. And so I was helping with content on there. So one thing but I've always, as long as it worked around my normal schedule, my weekly schedule, it does work for me. I mean, the last semester, I'm a ghostwriter as well, and I was writing quite an intense book with a celebrity last semester, and actually coming into university and teaching students was some relief from the intensity of that work that I had at home. So it's a balance. So it's not necessarily about the pay. It's like Jamie says, it's a nice little bit of extra pocket money. You're not going to make a fortune doing it, but you look at it as a whole. It's a good thing to do. I find it fulfilling, and the extra bit of money at the end of the month is quite nice.
Yeah. I always look at the money from that as just kind of an extra, bit that I can spend on holidays or whatever. For anyone who is interested in learning more of the practicals about how to break into lecturing, we do have a video tutorial on this, which you can purchase from our website, which I think Jamie was helped us with that video because it was a webinar that we did originally. So yeah, there's lots more advice on there, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. But before we let you both go, we always do our final question, which is getting your recommendation of a piece of work by a freelance journalist. Jamie, have you got something that you'd like to share?
I do, and it's someone who was in the next cycle after me at News Associates. I've not seen them in years, but I follow them online. They're a culture freelance writer who also used to be a dancer, more in the Irish dance. I mean, it's Holly Geraghty, and she just recently wrote a piece, well, I say recently, it was December, but for The Huck. And it was on a Gaza breakdancing crew that was helping kind of the local community, and they've been embedded in the community for 20 years. And obviously with all what's going on at the moment, it kind of just spoke about how they're still trying to kind of help people and unite them through dance, as well as obviously the struggles and how the studios have been bombed and things like that. So it was a really interesting piece.
Oh, wow. That sounds fascinating, and, just something that's really unique as well. Beth, how about you, your recommendation?
I'd like to give a little shout out to Emma O'Hagan's recent piece in Fabulous magazine, which was about a girl with an eating disorder and her best friend. So how her best friend has been with her through 15 years of this eating disorder, how their friendship has changed, how she supported her. It's just a very heartfelt piece about the importance of friendship. And it's very honest about how the eating disorder has affected her and her relationships outside of that as well.
Fantastic. Oh, they both sound really interesting pieces, so I will go and dig out the link for those and put them in our show notes.
Fantastic. So that's it for this episode. If you want bonus podcast episodes, you can become a premium newsletter subscriber where you get access to an extra weekly newsletter, and all of our other resources, including that video tutorial on breaking into lecturing that we mentioned, can be found on our website, which is freelancingforjournalists.com.
Yes, but until next time, it's goodbye for now.
Bye.